Hiệp định Đối tác Kinh tế Chiến lược Xuyên Thái Bình Dương, gọi tắt là TPP, là một thỏa thuận thương mại tự do, với mục đích hội nhập các nền kinh tế thuộc khu vực châu Á-Thái Bình Dương. Từ 4 quốc gia tham gia ban đầu, gồm Brunei, Chile, New Zealand và Singapore, đến nay TPP đã có 11 quốc gia và sắp tới con số này sẽ là 12 với sự góp mặt của Nhật Bản. Mục tiêu ban đầu của hiệp định là giảm 90% các loại thuế xuất nhập khẩu giữa các nước thành viên trước ngày 1 tháng 1 năm 2006 và cắt giảm bằng 0% tới năm 2015. Đây là một thỏa thuận toàn diện bao quát tất cả các khía cạnh chính của một hiệp định thương mại tự do, bao gồm trao đổi hàng hóa, các quy định về xuất xứ, can thiệp, rào cản kỹ thuật, trao đổi dịch vụ, vấn đề sở hữu trí tuệ. Với mục tiêu trên, khi Việt Nam tham gia vào TPP, sẽ có một số lĩnh vực mặt hàng được hưởng lợi khi xuất khẩu vào các nước thuộc TPP có thể được hưởng thuế xuất nhập khẩu bằng không. Cơ hội là rất lớn, tuy nhiên thách thức cũng không nhỏ. Vậy TPP, Hiệp định Đối tác Chiến lược Xuyên Thái Bình Dương, có tác động như thế nào tới nền kinh tế của Việt Nam và chúng ta cần phải chuẩn bị gì khi tham gia vào TPP?
Chào quý vị đến với chương trình Cận cảnh của FBNC. Hôm nay chúng ta có một cuộc trao đổi với một vị giáo sư nổi tiếng của Mỹ là giáo sư Peter Petri của Đại học Brandeis University tại Mỹ. Nhân dịp giáo sư qua Việt Nam trao đổi về đề tài Hiệp định Thương mại Xuyên Thái Bình Dương Trans-Pacific Partnership, chúng tôi mời giáo sư đến trường quay của chương trình Cận cảnh để có cuộc trao đổi về một cái đề tài cũng rất là mới và nhận được sự quan tâm rất nhiều của giới kinh doanh cũng như nhiều bạn đọc quan tâm khác. Chúng tôi xin được giới thiệu giáo sư Peter Petri của Đại học Brandeis.
Thank you very much. Thank you for inviting me. It's a pleasure to be on your show.
Hello, Professor Peter. We have the pleasure to ask you to join the interview today at the seminar. You did a very good presentation about TPP to the business audience. And I also learned that you visited some Vietnamese factory to
Yes.
view them. So far, how you view the Vietnam business?
Well, it's very interesting to me. I have been to Vietnam before, but not often. So I am learning a lot, learning and seeing very large changes. The factory we visited yesterday was interesting. It was in new areas of business. They were making yarn as well as fabrics, as well as garments. Beautiful factory. When you walk outside the buildings, you see beautiful flowers and trees. Inside the buildings, very clean, very professional. So it was quite an interesting experience.
Do they export to the U.S.? Well,
they export the garments, the finished products to the U.S. and some other countries, but the fabric and the yarn that they make, they use themselves in the products that they export later. So it's they have a whole supply chain, and I understand that is still quite unusual in Vietnam because most of the work is in the garment production rather than these other pieces of business.
did they ask you about TPP? Actually, you know that in Vietnam so far, the concept TPP looked very new. Years ago,
Yes.
we learned about APEC, about WTO.
Yeah.
Could you please clarify that? Is it we will do the mini APEC within Asia Pacific region?
The TPP is of course new. It's about 2 or 3 years old, depending on what you take as the starting point. There was a small agreement among 4 countries from 2006, but that has now included, eventually went from 4 countries to 8 countries to 9 to 11 countries, and now it looks like Japan will be also a member. So it's very ambitious. What they want to do is to write rules for trade between them that will be very good for poorer countries like Vietnam, for richer countries like the United States and Japan, other countries in the middle like Malaysia. It's a little like the WTO in that it is trying to come up with formal rules, but it will have many more rules than the WTO. and will cover more sectors of the economies than the WTO.
It means the requirement would be more difficult, correct?
The requirements would be more difficult for countries to meet. They would be more difficult for Vietnam to meet. But at the same time, the opportunities would be bigger. Much bigger possible gains, much better access to the markets in America and in Japan for Vietnamese companies. So it's hard, but it's potentially very beneficial.
We learned about that the tariff would be reduced into even 0%. Is it the final target?
That's right. The target is to reduce tariffs to 0%.
Yes.
Eventually. Now, for some countries, for some products, that may last 5 years or 10 years before they reach 0%. And my guess, remember, I'm a professor. I'm not a negotiator. I don't represent the government.
Yes.
And my guess is that they will leave tariffs on some products. For example, Japan is very reluctant to take away all tariffs on rice. They want to make sure that some rice production is protected by tariffs. So there will be some very sensitive products that don't have zero tariffs. But for most products, the goal is to reduce tariffs to zero, to make markets completely open to businesses from other countries.
It means at that time, consumer in the U.S. or consumer in Vietnam can get the product at the same price.
That's the idea. Now, when you begin to look at trade negotiations, as you can imagine, they're very complicated. So in the end, there are other rules that they will have to agree on. And in the case of Vietnam, maybe we will discuss this later, it will be very important what kind of products Vietnamese manufacturers can use in making the products that go to America. There will be rules about that. So it's complicated, but the idea is basically very simple, is to make markets open to all countries in this group of 12 countries.
And when the tariff barrier lifted, then you think that the investment, the foreign investment, capital flow, people flow would be more relaxed, would be free easily?
It will be a lot freer. Goods are the easiest things to flow. Capital is a little more difficult. I think what's very important is when countries get together and agree on trade, entrepreneurs, businesses, all of a sudden look for and find new opportunities. Think about what happened in Vietnam when the bilateral trade agreement was signed with the United States first, a little more than 10 years ago. Then the WTO agreement was signed. And after each of these agreements, a tremendous amount of new business opened up. At the time when you sign the agreement, you're not quite sure what it is that will happen. An economist can make predictions. But it's really up to the business people to find opportunities and then use them to build new businesses. And we know from experience that that happens a lot when a good trade agreement is signed.
At the moment, we see that from 4 countries now, TPP partner now increase that 11 countries and coming maybe Japan.
Yes.
But how about Russia? How about China and India? Will they like to join, or will we like to invite them?
Those are some of the hardest countries to involve because they're big. They have their own rules. They are tough to include in trade agreements. But I would certainly hope that the end result will be a very big trade agreement, which also includes all of the Asia-Pacific countries and maybe even Europe. So I think that will be the end result, but that may be quite a bit of a time away. But very soon, this 12 countries now in the TP, 11, but with Japan, 12, very soon this is likely to grow bigger. Korea, for example, will probably want to join. Thailand maybe the Philippines, maybe even Indonesia will want to join. So that will come first. That also may take some months or even years. But it's a gradual process, and we know that it is moving in the right direction. It's getting bigger and getting more powerful and more important.
Thank you, Professor. Xin mời quý vị, chúng ta sẽ trở lại với giáo sư Peter trong phần trao đổi kế tiếp về các cái ảnh hưởng của cái việc ký kết cái hiệp định thương mại xuyên Thái Bình Dương TPP đối với nền kinh tế Việt Nam. Xin mời quý vị có đôi phút giải lao.